combining a lot of technology doesn't always work well. So thank you and for all coming. Apologize for the false start, but I'm glad we've got the microphones working. I'm Garland White. Appreciate the patience throughout this lecture series, which has been, say, 90% Zoom, with only this being the first and full in-person lecture, which happens to be the last one of the season, which makes me sad, but it gives us a lot to look forward to in the fall. So thank you all for coming again. And I'm the co-chair of the lecture committee with Mr. Frank Berry. Let's all observe a moment of silence for those members who are part of us. Thank you. On with tonight's program. Again, this is the last of the series, and we thought we'd end with a very special speaker. As he already mentioned, he knows nearly everyone in the room, and for good reason, Mr. David Gooch, who needs no introduction. So I'll turn the microphone over to him for now, and then we'll have a video to watch in a few moments. But for now, Mr. David Gooch, please welcome him.
Audio cut out.
No, that light is, if you dim it, it's going to bother you. Turn the light on. Yeah. The light coming out. It's not here? No, it's I think this was it here. Okay. Well, what an honor for me to be at the Roundtable Club, giving y'all a presentation of sort of my life and my Galatoire's family. I know this club was founded, I think, in 1898 as a literary club, and I know it's a very historic club also. So I'm David Gooch. I was born in 1943. I'm the son of Clarice Galatoire Gooch, and my father was John Paul Gooch. In New Orleans, where you went to school was always very important, so I'll start off with that. I went to St. Rita Grammar School, but I ended up graduating from Ecole Classique in 8th grade. Then I went to Jesuits for 2 years, and I went back to Ecole Classique, and I was in the first graduating class of Ecole Classique. And then I went to Tulane for 1 year, and at Tulane I was a K. I think they might have some Ks here, but I wasn't initiated. So I went to LSU and became a D. My goal at LSU was to have as much fun as I could in college, to really enjoy myself and have a lot of fun without flunking out. And fortunately, I succeeded. I graduated and never had to sit out, flunk out, or anything. Well, I did take a speech course. I was very shy about speaking. Anyway, they said you should always start off a speech with something to get people in a laughing mood. So maybe I'll tell two little jokes, a man joke and a lady's joke. But the man joke is my speech is going to go back in years. It has a lot to do with years. So many years of everything that took place throughout the history and all of time. But so they have Goodyear tires, and they have, I wanted to see if anybody might know the difference between a Goodyear tire and 365 used condoms. Well, I'll tell you, each year is very important in the wine business. Wine is a big part of the restaurant business. Galatoire has a fantastic wine list, and we have a lot of very good years. Not too many bad years, but we emphasize the good years. Well, if you have a Goodyear tire, you have a good year with that tire. If you have 365 used condoms, you have a very, very good year. Anyway, and then for the ladies, I'm going to talk about one of my mother, Clarice Galatoire. This wasn't her, this was her joke. But it's kind of a joke, a favorite joke. It was about a young bride getting ready to get married. She went to seamstress, and she wanted a beautiful white long negligee, sort of see-through white silk negligee, but it had to have a mink cuff around the bottom of the nightgown. And the seamstress said, well, that's kind of odd. She said, why do you want a mink cuff around the bottom? She said, what? To keep my neck warm. I'm going to give y'all a little bit about my family history. So I'm going to go. I'll start off with my father. His side of the family got a break. I know y'all are a historic society. So my father, both sides have history, like everybody's family does. But I'll talk a little bit about my father now. I think most of y'all want to know about my Galatoire side. So on my father's side, my ancestors go back to we're descendants of William Bradford. He came over here on the Mayflower, and he was the first governor. He was the first governor of the Plymouth colony. He was the governor for 30 years. So I'm very proud of that, to be a descendant of him. Then also on my father's side, we go back to another descendant. I'm a descendant of Sir William Gooch. William Bradford came over. He was born in 1590. He died in 1657. So he came over on the Mayflower. But Sir William Gooch, he was born in 1681 and died in 1751. When he came over as the first governor. It wasn't a state of Virginia, but it was a province of Virginia. He was the first governor of the province of Virginia. And then I'll skip over a lot of other ancestors, but I will go to my grandfather. My grandfather, Albert Gallatin Gooch. This is my brother Al. He's named after Albert. He's Albert Gooch. Anyway, Albert Gallatin Gooch, my grandfather, was born in 1858 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, on a plantation. And I kind of hate to say this is something I'm supposed to be proud of now, but I'll tell you anyway. But as a little boy, his best friend was his slave. They lived on a plantation, and this was a common thing amongst people in those days. They lived out on a plantation, and they didn't have kids to play with much, so his best friend was his little slave boy. Anyway, things changed during the Civil War. And so he was kind of elderly when he had my father. My father was born in 1903, passed away in 1980. So my grandfather was the one that had the little slave boy. Okay, let's see now. So he came to New Orleans around the 1890s, and my Gooch family, my immediate family's all been born in New Orleans and been here ever since. Now I'll go back to maybe the more fun side of my history. That's my Galatoire side. They go back kind of far too. They came from Gaul a long, long time ago. And we have records that go back to the 6th century. There was a bishop, Galactic. The name Galatoire kind of changed over the years. I think it means galactic means lactic is milk. So it's the galaxy of milk, which is the Milky Way. So that's what I feel that Galatoire means nowadays. But he was a bishop in Po. That's in the southwestern part of France in the Pyrenees. That's where my Galatoire family comes from, and we still have Galatoire cousins that live there now. And he was martyred for chasing the Visigoths out of the area, the pagans out of the area. He was martyred, and he became a saint. And so he's a Saint Galatoire. They have a statue of him that's in the Louvre. When they made the statue, they used Pierre Clemenceau. He was the famous tiger. He was the premier of France in World War I. But they used his profile to make the statue. And Pierre Clemenceau's son and grandson moved to New Orleans. And they, I don't know if we still might have some Clemenceaus in New Orleans. They moved here, and we used to come to Galatoires a lot. And one of our famous dishes is Clemenceau, chicken Clemenceau, shrimp Clemenceau, all kind of Clemenceau. Clemenceau garnish was named after him, who was a frequent customer at Galatoires. Let's see. My Galatoire family, like I said, they've lived in the same area since the 6th century, and they specialized in pork and meat. And for many, many centuries, they've always been pork and meat people. I visited there in the 1960s, and my family had a big meat packing company, and they were doing pretty well with it. So it's funny that they had a meat packing company. I'm in the food business too. Galatoire, they're still in the food business. Let's see. My great-granduncle was a guy named Jean Galatoire. He grew up in the area in Pau, and in the 1870s, as a young teenager, he decided to come over to the New World and see what he could make of his life. So he came to New Orleans, worked in a few places, and a few businesses, saloons, whatever they had. Then they had a Royals Fair going, getting ready to get started in Alabama. So he went to Birmingham in the 1870s, and he opened up a Galatoire saloon in Birmingham. And that was the first Galatoire's place. It was a saloon. They had it for about 10 years. And came back to New Orleans and worked at different saloons and so forth. And he started working in the building where we are now. It was called Victor's Saloon. I'll give you a little history of the building. The building was built in 1832. I have a sheet from the architect that designed it and lists all the materials. The materials would cost about $10,000 at that time that they used to build a building. It was built as a townhouse, and they converted it into a saloon. So Jean was working there, and in 1905, Victor decided he was getting elderly. He decided to sell it, so Jean bought it. When he bought it, he decided to change it from a saloon to a restaurant. So he wrote to his family in France and said, I need some French chefs. They sent the French chefs over to New Orleans, and they saw our great local seafood, our trout, redfish, pompano, shrimp, crab, and oysters. And they started cooking this delicious seafood in classic French preparation and style, things like Meunier, Amandine, Marguerite, Marchand en Verre, Béarnaise, Hollandaise, stuff like that. We still cook pretty much the same way today. We haven't changed our style much at all over the years. When he bought the building in 1905, they had an old clock in it, which is still behind the desk at Galatoire's. The clock kind of represents so many, it's very symbolic of so many things that are involved with Galatoire's. The tradition of a Galatoire, the tradition of a clock, the steadiness, it rings every hour, rings twice on the hour. This clock was built by a guy named Stanislas Fournier. He was a Frenchman that came over to New Orleans in the 1850s, and he made clocks. He had a clock shop on Iberville Street. And he made the clock at the St. Louis Cathedral. They had a lot of Fournier clocks around the city. The guy kind of went berserk because they would ring a lot. And as he got older, in the 1880s, he kind of went crazy, and he started, all the ringing of the clocks got into his head, and he started tearing the clocks apart. They had to put him in a solid and he died. But the clock at Galatoire's, it rings twice on the hour. I like to say that let me see what I have to, Galatoire is a place where time and the outside world fade from consciousness. So time kind of fades, but it kind of stands still when you had Galatoire's. But the clock does represent, even though it's traditional, the same thing over and over, it does change a little bit. It rings twice on the hour. The first time it rings, if it's 2 o'clock, it will ring 2 times. If it's 3 o'clock, it will ring 3 times. And that sort of represents the good time you've just had at Galatoire's. And then 1 minute later, it'll ring the same amount a second time. And that kind of represents the good time you're gonna keep on having there and stay there for a good while. So, now Jean, he was married to Gabrielle Galatoire. I think he got married in the 1890s, but they didn't have any children. He had a lot of nieces and nephews, and so some of them came to New Orleans as teenagers too, just like he did. And 3 of them was my grandfather, Leon Galatoire, and 2 of his brothers, Gabriel Galatoire and Justin Galatoire. So these 3 brothers, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the singer. It's a guy looking at me. I better forget looking at him. I don't know what that is. Sorry, I hadn't noticed him before. How you doing? Sorry about that. So the three brothers started working at the restaurant, and they bought the restaurant from their uncle Jean Galatoire in 1918. And the three brothers worked very well together. My grandfather, Leon, he was great at the back of the house, handling the cooking and all that stuff. Justin, his brother, was good more in the front of the house, greeting customers, working with the waiters and the floor and stuff in the front. Now, the third brother was Gabriel. Gabriel was a bachelor. He didn't have any children. My grandfather had 4 children, and his brother Justin had 4 children. Gabriel didn't have any children. He was a man about town. He used to, he lived on the 3rd floor of the restaurant in a lavish apartment. He collected art and antiques. He loved to wear white linen suits, and his brothers teased him, said he was prancing around the restaurant. He always smelled like fancy cologne and so forth, and he didn't like to get his hands dirty. So they used to make fun of him, even though the three of them owned it together, and they all worked in their own special fields. But even though his 2 brothers made fun of Gabriel, what they didn't realize is back in those days, you didn't have PR or any of that kind of stuff, which means so much to restaurant and all businesses. But he was sort of like the beginning of PR, because what he would do is he joined all the fancy societies in New Orleans, the History Society, the opera, the symphony. He joined all that. He became very good friends with, and who belongs to those organizations, but the creme de la creme of New Orleans society. So by joining those things, he became good friends with all those people. And so when they wanted to have special parties, celebrate a birthday, anniversary, they said, well, let's go to Mr. Galatoire's place. So that was kind of the beginning of PR. And still today, we have 5th and 6th generations of customers that he kind of brought their ancestors back, way back then. So he has a lot to do with the building up of the name of Galatoire and keeping it going for such a long time. Anyway, he passed away in 1945. And so that left the restaurant with the 2 brothers, each with 4 children. So that when they passed on, that left, each of them had 4 children. The 3rd generation, there were 8 owners. My mother was one of the 8. Let's see. But right away, from the very beginning up until forever, we started, especially with all the people that Gabriel started bringing in, we started doing a tremendous amount of business. World War II came along, and of course, everything had to not shut down. It slowed up a good bit. And after World War II, things started picking up again. In the 1950s, we had a write-up in the Holiday magazine, and that kind of put us on the map on a national level. And we got a big award from WDSU TV. We had after the war, 2 of my uncles, my Uncle Rene and my Uncle Gabi, came and worked at the restaurant as young men. And another cousin's husband, the guy Chris Ansel, came to work. He was a retired engineer, but he came to work at the restaurant. So they had him go get this award at WDSU, and while he was accepting the award for outstanding something or other, he dropped dead of a heart attack. So that was kind of rough. Let's see. In 1967, my Uncle Gabi decided to retire, and that was the same year that I graduated from LSU. So since he retired and I graduated, I had almost a year to kill before I went to the Army. I graduated RTC. I had to go in as a lieutenant, and I spent a year in Vietnam. But I had some time to kill, about 6 months or a year to kill. So they said, why don't you come work as a major D? Take Gabi's place for a while. So I did that, and I loved it. I said, well, this is a great business. I enjoyed it. I went in the Army for a couple of years, came back in 1970. And at that time, I said, oh, I'd like to come back and work at the restaurant. And they said, well, that's nice, but we don't need you. We have enough family members here. I said, well, that's okay. I'll go to graduate business school, and I'd like to work in the kitchen. You said, you want to work in the kitchen? I said, yeah, I'd like to learn the basics of the business. But I said, if you want to do that, fine. So I was lucky enough to run into Don Toso over here, and we became roommates. So I was going to grad school, working as a cook in the kitchen, learned how to break eggs and do all the stuff that the chefs do. And then I decided to get married, and I got married in 1975. So about that time, I had Chris Hansen, the one that died, his son had been working at Galatoire. He had been he graduated from Tulane in engineering in the 50s, and his grandfather, Justin, said, come work at the restaurant. So he said, okay, give it a try. And he loved it. And he had, 1970, he had ideas of expanding the restaurant and reopening the upstairs, because we used to have private dining room way back then. And those private rooms probably had a lot of hanky-panky going on, like a lot of restaurants did in the old days. But we closed it during World War II, and his idea was to reopen the upstairs and have private parties. The family said no, so he decided to leave and open up his own restaurant. He opened up Christians. So around that same time, I got married and became general manager in 1975. I married Ann Bradley. She helped me tremendously throughout the years. She behind every good man, there's always a good woman, and she was a good part of my health. I'll tell you a little bit about her. Some of the things she did was that she started the New Orleans Wine and Food Experience. She passed away in 2011, and after she passed away, WYES honored her postmortemly with their Max Zander Wine Award. So they gave her a big award after she passed away. So we're very proud of that. We had a big function at Galatoire honoring her. Even though she passed away, I'll tell you about my history too. So this is sort of part of Galatoire. But one thing that I missed was we had a weekly date, my wife and I. We go to the country club and we'd spend 2 hours and talk about everything going on for the week. And so after she passed away, I missed that tremendously. So I invited her mother to come, Margie Bradley, to come have lunch with me every week. And we did that for several months. And after a while, she could see I was starting to get an eye a little bit. And one day she comes up to me and says, David, I'd like you to meet a friend of mine. I said, thank you, Margie, but my friends have given me a list of 30 women already. I don't need your help. So in that department. Well, the next thing you know is I'm going to pick her up and take her to lunch, and this girl comes walking out. I said, wow, that's a cute looking girl. That's what I wanted to fix you up with. Well, anyway, that was Julie Aberdeen Newsom. Anyway, things worked out, and I never date anybody on my list of 30, but I'm married to Julie now. We got married 2.5 years ago, so I'm very happy. So, well, that's when I moved to the front and became general manager. So I'm a young man with ideas of what we should do. At this time, all the restaurants feared the underground gourmet, Richie Collin. He loved Galatoire. We were 5 stars. He loved Galatoire. One day when I was, I think around 1975, 76, something like that, he came and he had the trout margarita. He wrote, and that was his favorite thing of all was the trout margarita, the rich hollandaise sauce. It was so delicious. So the next week after he came, this is something that it's hard to believe, but I love what happened, because you learn from mistakes. Headlines of the paper, Galatoire's a sad decline from 5 beans to 2 beans. I said, oh my God, what's going on? And I realized they have the hollandaise sauce is very rich, made with butter. But I found out, working in the kitchen, that you can make a delicious hollandaise. It's probably 90% as good, but almost as good, 90%. But at that time, butter was 5 times more expensive than margarine. So if you make it with margarine, it's going to taste pretty good, but it might be back like the Goodyear tire and the other Goodyear. It's not going to be nearly as good. Anyway, so he picked up on that something was off with the hollandaise. And so, that was the headline, a sad decline. So it just put me to work harder. And we worked the kitchen, all the cooks and everything. And about 4 or 5 years later, Galatoire's was back to 5 beans. He realized the hard work that we did. And we weren't going to make a mistake like that again. So Now we don't even have margarine in the restaurant. We use butter and clarified butter. So anyway, so that was a good lesson that I learned. Trying to save a couple of pennies, and it cost us a sad decline. Okay. I'm trying to go from time to time. The 70s was also kind of the beginning of the Friday power lunch. I'm sure y'all have heard a lot about that. So I'll talk a little bit about that. MoMA's parade was always on Thursday night, and a lot of the MoMA's had a lot of hell raisers. Bloody Freeman was kind of really known for that. So what they'd do is they'd ride and have a big time Thursday night, and they would take off Friday because they were too hungover. So they'd come to Galatoire and start it over again. They started staying later and later, staying all afternoon. And that was kind of the beginning of the power lunch on Fridays. And we used to start having lines for people waiting to get in. Because after World War II, there was no reservations. And we've been that way for a long time until recently. I'll get to talk to that later. But there was no reservations, first come, first served. We used to have long lines. One day on a Thursday, I opened up the front door and had a regular social lady who I knew. She was there with a book and a chair. I said, come on in. So I thought, I'll seat you over here. Where do you want to go? She said, I'm coming with 10 ladies tomorrow. I said, what do you mean tomorrow? She said, last year I invited my 10 social friends to come and we got turned away. We couldn't get a table. So this year I want to make sure that I'm first in line. So she came Thursday at noon, and this was the beginning. So she stayed all day, and then at nighttime, when 6 o'clock came, so I get it dark, she had someone come to relieve her that she paid to spend the night. And he sat in the chair or slept on the sidewalk all night long. And the next day at 11 o'clock, she came and took her place and was first in line and got the table she wanted. She had her 10 lady friends. So that was kind of the beginning of people waiting in line and paying people to wait in line. It started getting so bad that I'll jump to the 2005 when Katrina was. That Friday, I think before Mardi Gras of that year, before Katrina, this is unbelievable. On Tuesday afternoon, people started coming, being paid to wait in line. 3 nights, incomprehensible. But what a compliment to us, but also it was an aggravation. Sometimes people would come and wait in line and sell this place to somebody else and give them more money. So we had problems with it. But so what we decided to do was to auction off those places. And so now for the Friday before Mardi Gras and Friday before Christmas, we have an auction about a month before the event, and we auction off those reservations for those tables. And we've raised over $2 million, that has been given to local charities since 1905. So, that's still working well. Okay. Let's see. Back in 1979 was King Tut. The lines we had at that time were unbelievable. We have a record that I'm kind of proud of. For the month of March in 1969, we keep track of the head count. Our head count was 17,000 people. It's hard to, it's an awful lot of people to be serving. We would have lines all day long. We had to close at 2 o'clock, 2 or 3 o'clock, just to give the kitchen a break and then reopen. We did a tremendous amount of people with just that one dining room that seats 120 people. Give you a comparison, that record wasn't broken until December of 2017. A couple of years ago, we broke that record. We did 19,000 people in that month. But with the 19,000 people that we served in that month, it was with 7 dining rooms, including the one big dining room that we had before. So anyway, that's just something I'm kind of proud of. But I'll tell you a couple of awards that we're also very proud of. 1981, we got the National Restaurant News Fine Dining Hall of Fame. 87, the Restaurant Institution's Ivy Award of Distinction. Mimi Sheridan's Top 50 Award in the Condé Nast. But one award that I'm very proud about is earlier I told you in the 1950s, Holiday Magazine wrote an article that put us on the map around the country. Shortly after that, they started having a Holiday Magazine award reunion where they would give the awards to different restaurants around the country. And that developed into Travel Holiday and so forth. And then in 1989, they would have a convention for restaurants every year where you get together with other restaurateurs and you have a lot in common. In 1989, the Travel Holiday Awards gave out a special award to 4 restaurants that had received that award for 25 years consecutively. And we were one of those that received that. So I was very, very proud of that, to get it for 25 years. Then they kind of closed down. They stopped doing it after that. But the restaurateurs were upset because we enjoyed that convention, get together with once a year to discuss things, get to know other restaurateurs, and we missed it. So we said, look, at that time, they had kind of one guy who was the restaurant critic, who determined who would get the award and who wouldn't. If for some reason he didn't like you, you wouldn't get the award. A guy named Robert Lawrence Baldwin. He was an ex-monk and a great food and wine guy. Very particular. Anyway, the restaurateurs missed all that. So we decided to start our own organization. And we called it Distinguished Restaurants of North America. It's called Dorona, and it's still around now. Dorona, you might see the Dorona Award when you go to good restaurants. We started that in the early, I think 1991, the restaurateurs got together and we said, instead of having one critic decide who's gonna get it, we're gonna put all the information into a computer spreadsheet, and the computer is gonna it's gonna be fair. You can't get around it, okay? Everything's gonna be fair, and the computer's gonna decide. So I was on part of the deal where we're gonna do all this. And the first year that the Dorona announced their new winners, Galatoire was not one of them. I said, what? We just got it for 25 years, and now that we got it computerized, but you have to realize Galatoire was a little bit different from other restaurants. We had no reservations, no bar waiting area, no valet parking, no credit cards. Everything that the computer asked for, we were no. So it's better. Galatoire can't get the award. The computer could not pick up the tradition, the heart and soul of a place, how there's been so much of a family, and how much it means to all the customers, the regular. The computer can't pick up all that. Anyway, so we started saying, you know, we don't like to change. Our motto has always been toujours le même chose, just like the clock doesn't change. Ding, 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 doesn't change. Toujours le même chose, everything the same. But we realized we have to keep up with the times a little bit. And so we started making a few changes. One of the first changes I made in 1991 was credit cards. At that time, we were cash only and house accounts. And house accounts, we had over 7,000 house accounts. We still have house accounts, and a lot of cash. But if a tourist would come in and we give them a credit, they give us, oh no, can't do it. They were lost, they didn't know what to do. So we started taking credit cards. And when we did that, our regular customers got mad at us. They said, you are destroying my private club. You let anybody come in here and sign a credit card. They were furious that we were taking credit cards. Anyway, I think nowadays those people started using credit cards too. Then we decided we needed to bring in a computer system just for our guest checks. And I found some of the old line waiters, they were all, and the old line cook, they're all upset that I wanted to bring a computer into the restaurant. And because the computer keeps track of everything. You place your order. Before that, everything was handwritten. You just pass it around. You take the cash. Who knows what happens to it? But anyway, a lot of funny stuff was going on. Anyway, with the computer, the waiters had to put their orders in the computer. Went to the kitchen, so everything was much more up and up. The first year after we put the computer in, we saw sales increase due to the computer $100,000. Anyway, but it's more than paid for itself. Y'all see this guy still looking at me. Hello? Okay. was telling you how my grandfather had 4 children and his brother had 4 children. So that was the 3rd generation. That was 8 children. So that means kind of when people passed on, they had 8 owners of the rest. I'm the 4th generation. So we had about 25 4th generation family members, 30. So the ownership of the record started dwindling. In the around 1997, I believe, the family got together and they thought that it would be a good idea to reopen the upstairs. Remember, Chris Anson wanted to do that way back in the early 70s. The family said, no. They loved no. Anyway, the younger generation decided that maybe we should reopen the upstairs and make use of reservations and private cars and so forth. So at that time, the family kind of got together and they decided to hire a new general manager. So we hired a young man, Melvin Rodriguez, and he's still the CEO of the restaurant now. So we hired him in 1997. So he's been with us a long time. He's been doing a great job for us. So he came in and he always saw the renovation, and we reopened the upstairs and 3 dining rooms upstairs, and we started doing reservations there. And that has been going on very well. I'll tell you a quick little story about 1991. They had the International Wine and Food Society convention in New Orleans. My wife and I were on the committee, so it was a pretty big deal. We invited Julia Childs to come, Robert Mondavi. They all came to the event. Then when it was like a 3 or 4 day event, when it was over, well, my wife took Julia Childs out to lunch and then shopping in the French Quarter in the antique shop in Royal Street. So it was very exciting for us to entertain Julia Childs. But when this convention was over, the committee decided one of the girls on the committee was from Natchez. He said, we'll take a weekend excursion to Natchez and visit Natchez with just our committee and a couple of the speakers that came in. So we took a weekend bus trip with Julia Child and Robert Mondavi and Aaron Cunningham and some famous people. It was quite an experience. But what I want to tell you about, when we got to Natchez, they had all the well-known people in Natchez had a big reception at one of the fancy plantations. And when we went into, they had a big line greeting everybody, and everybody knew me. My wife said, how can everybody know you? This is Natchez. I said, you don't realize that our customers, we don't like to, we say we have local customers, and that doesn't mean they live in New Orleans. But there's so many people that live all over Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, that in those places they might not have, they love to come to New Orleans. And they have people that come every weekend almost to come to New Orleans, and they all knew me. So, but it was amazing if you think about it. But it really impressed my wife that all those people knew me, and that's why, because they would love to come to a place like Galatoire every weekend. Okay, let's see. Another big thing that our cousins did, like in the late 1990s, is we used to have hand-chopped ice, and that was a big deal. Hand-chopped ice. We decided to keep up the time to get an ice machine. And we got 4 letters about that. I hate to tell you some of the letters. The letters talked about how they enjoyed seeing, it almost got like slavery. They enjoyed seeing people chop ice. I couldn't comprehend it. It was strange. Oh. 2005, Katrina came along. So we had to close for 6 months like everybody else. And I'll jump forward a year after we reopened. A year later, we didn't increase our menu prices, but a lot of Katrina is similar to what we're going through now with the COVID. I looked at our books a year after we've been open, we closed 6 months for Katrina, and after we reopened a year later, we didn't increase menu prices or anything, but our average guest check per customer increased $5 a person without increasing menu. What happened was everyone's frame of mind was, we went through Katrina, what to expect next? Life is too short. Who knows what's going to happen? Let's make the best of it. Let's go and order the most expensive stuff, the best, nothing's just expensive, but let's have the good bottle of wine, the best year, the good year. Let's have the best of whatever we can. Let's stay and enjoy ourselves. So because of that, mentality of everybody. New Orleans, the average check increased tremendously like that. Let's see. Right after Katrina, it's very hard coming back, but we had a staff meeting, getting everybody back on board. And at that meeting, a lot of our staff presented me with a rubber ball, not a regular rubber ball. It was a rubber ball made up of, it was about this big, of rubber bands. I guess I still have a little cheapness in me. Even though I learned from the butter and the margarine field, I still had a little cheapness. And we used to get all our vegetables would come wrapped in rubber bands. And I used to save rubber bands and recycle them. So the staff was making fun of me. So without me knowing it, they saved a whole bunch of rubber, enough to make a ball like this. So at the staff meeting, when we came back with Katrina, they gave me that rubber ball. I said, wow, I was so surprised. I said, you know what? I did this, and boy, it bounced way up, much higher. I said, you know, that rubber ball was just like us, just like our Galatoire family, just like our staff. We're going to bounce back higher and better than we did before. So that rubber ball has a lot of symbolism to me.
Amen.
Yeah. Okay, 1909, Galatoire's family, like the ownership was dwindling like the fifth and sixth generation. So they decided to sell. I was very upset about it, but I kind of went along with the flow. And in 1909, we sold the restaurant. I'm sorry, 2009. We sold it mainly to John George, who's a Thai trust player. And a couple of my cousins still kept their ownership, though. Leon Galatoire, Duane Galatoire, and Michelle Galatoire, the three of my cousins, they maintained their ownership. And anyway, we kind of sold it to them. And soon after that, they bought the building next door to Galatoire, so we opened up Galatoire's 33. And that's done very well. We have it sort of pretty much the same as Galatoire. It had its own kitchen, a little bit more contemporary menu. But we used the bar for both places, and now we use the dining room for both places, with the same menu, the same kitchen. But up until COVID, Galatoire's 33 had its own menu, a more contemporary menu, but it has great facility up there. It's got a nice big room that will seat about 130, 140 people, and that's been going very well for us. But also after Katrina, we opened up in Baton Rouge, had a nice restaurant there. We had to close that in 2018. Okay, let's see. We've always had a strict dress code, coat and tie for gentlemen, and it used to be up until about the 70s, we used to require the coat and tie for lunch and dinner. Then in the 70s, we changed it to just coat and tie for dinner, not for lunch. And lately, we've tried it. Back in the 90s, we decided to eliminate the tie. We still required the jacket. And we also had no shorts and no pants for ladies. And that used to cause a problem. I'll never forget one time I had 4 young ladies that flew in a private jet from Houston. And they were beautifully dressed, but they were slacks. This is kind of when ladies wearing slacks was first getting popular. So we turned them away, even though they flew in a private jet just to come have lunch at Galatoire. They got turned away. So about a half hour later, they came back in the shortest miniskirt. They looked like cookies. And they were laughing at me. They said, "You don't have pants on." They had gone to the shop full of hookers next door. They bought this outfit. So they were correct, and we seen them. I'm trying to tell you, I might be going too long. I was going to tell you a few Galatoire's funny stories. Well, let's see.
Remember, we're gentlemen scholars and
okay, well, this isn't a funny thing, but it's a true story. A friend of mine now, the Friday lunches on Galatoire, people kind of flirt, and the mirrors are very unusual. You can look over this way and see somebody over here. They go back and forth. And people look in the mirrors and they kind of flirt in mirrors, and you see somebody looking at it. So one time I had two people that didn't know each other. One was sitting at this table, one over there. They were looking, they started talking. The next Friday they came as a date. And one of them, a girl, Darlene Hingle, actually her father had been a chef at Galatoire a long time ago. So a couple of months later, Darlene called me and she says, you know, David, I met Jerry through the mirrors at Galatoire. We decided to get married. We want to have our reception at Galatoire on a Friday afternoon. Okay. We want to have the wedding there. We were just going to have 10 or 12 people at it. So 11 o'clock before we opened up, the minister came, married them. They both went to the table where they had met. They came from that table, got married, sat down. So I think they just celebrated their 25th anniversary. Real nice couple. Let's see, another little story I have. So many things happen on Friday. We had this little old lady come every Friday, and she'd bring a big hat box. She'd come by herself, put the hat box on the table with her, and she'd always have a nice bottle of fancy French Chablis, the most expensive French Chablis we had. And she would drink it, and with a hat box over there. And finally, we found out that in the hat box was the ashes of her husband. Before he passed away, if she would go out and drink wine, he would be furious. He would follow her out. So this was her way of getting back at her husband. You got that? I can't tell you how many stories we have in the restaurant, but that was one of my favorites. No, not Mrs. Atkins. She came 30 years, sat at the same table with her husband. Yeah, she came every night. And after he passed away, she would still come every night. Chauffeur would pick her up and her friend. They'd come down at 5:30, sit at the same table with a plaque, Mrs. Atkinson's table. And then we would close on Monday, so she'd go to Antoine's on Monday night. She'd come down, chauffeur would take it down. Let's see, another little old lady story that happened not too long ago. A regular customer, the elderly lady, would come with her husband for lunch, and she came up to the desk, and she says, David, I have to tell you, you have the wrong Pernod. You have the expensive Pernod. I like the cheap Pernod. And I said, what? I said, I didn't know they had more than one Pernod. So I'm kind of saying, geez, sounds like she's a little drunk. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And then she kept on talking about the expense. She doesn't like the expensive Pernod. She says you can tell the difference because the expensive Pernod has a stamp on the back of the bottle, and the cheap Pernod doesn't. And she gets it at Britannia liquor store, and she always buys the cheap Pernod. So I said, well, maybe she knows what she's talking about. So she was on a second Pernod on the rocks. So I went behind the bar, and sure enough, there was the bottle, the label looked a little bit different. So I started reading the label. It was 120 proof. The regular Pernod was 80 proof. So she didn't like that strong Pernod. She had two already. So I poured the regular Pernod and brought it to her, and she said, that's what I love. That's the cheap Pernod. That's what I want. Great. A little while later, her husband comes up to this, David, we can't have lunch. We gotta go. Let me go get the car, and can you help him walk out? She was stumbling all over the place. So I got her outside, and somebody he couldn't park. He had to park down the block. So I went walking next to the strip joint, and the barker was out there. And he said, "My God, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Look what you were doing to those little old ladies." And let's see, I'll tell you about Father Chambers was a Jesuit priest. I think he was head of that college, college across the river, Holy Cross College for many, many years. He was a good customer. He used to come all the time. So it was one afternoon. We had 4 people in their 60s, my age or so, well, back that time, and 2 couples, and they were having martinis, and one of them had a little oxygen tank with it. And so they were having a good time. The next thing we know is The guy with the oxygen tank just flips over, hits his head, you can hear it boom. And we called the trash truck, and they come out. So Father Chambers comes over, and the Father guy's out. I'm going to give him the last rites. They gave him the last rites, and Father Chambers left. The medics came, they got the guy, they brought him into the truck outside. And 20 minutes later, he comes walking back in. When he was at the table, his oxygen tank came out, and they didn't connect the new oxygen tank correctly, so he wasn't getting the oxygen. That's why he passed out. So when Father Chambers came back the next week and said, Father Chambers, you performed a miracle. He said the last rite, and the guy walked back up. Then I have a blue dog. George Rodriguez used to come all the time, and he would write blue dogs on the tablecloths and treasures. And one time he did a blue dog and a French bread for me, and I loved it. So I brought the French bread, blue dog home, and I shellacked it with a lot of shellac, and I did it every day for a couple of weeks. It was urgent. So on another Friday, busy Friday, he was there with a bunch of people. They were cutting up. They would party a lot. They were drinking, and the next thing I knew, they were throwing bread at one another and having a good time. So anyway, I had my blue dog French bread with me. I said, let me go show it to him. Maybe we'll do another one, I'm thinking. So I went and put it on a plate and showed it to him. And the young girl next to him looks at, oh, French bread, picks it up, boom, hits it over the head. My blue dog in there. My jaw just dropped. He said, don't worry, David, I'll do you another one. Anyway, that's about it.
We're about it. I don't want to cut you off at all, but you want to go ahead and open up to questions?
Yeah, I think, I guess. I'll tell you, well, it's not a joke, but I'll tell you, our waiters are so important to our business. And we had our first colored waiter was a young black boy that started working at 15 years old as a dishwasher. And he's still with us today. He's 50 years old now. And he became so very popular, Shelley's his name, that he was our first black waiter around about the 1990s, became a waiter. And a few years ago, like I said, he's very, very popular. He had a lot of regular customers that asked for him. He had a customer who was one of the co-founders of PayPal. The guy came in, he knew Shelley very well. 7 people, they spent $3,000. They was ordering very expensive wines and so forth. He gave him a $10,000 tip. He came in the next year with just 2 people. They spent $300. They gave him a $5,000 tip. The next year they came back again with 30 people, and they spent a fortune. They bought wine for the whole, champagne for the whole restaurant. They gave him another $10,000 tip. Just some things you see there are just unbelievable. I wanted to tell you a story about Gilberto, the waiter. I think I've kind of gone a little. We had another very popular waiter, Gilberto. This was I think this was about 2002. People loved Gilberto. He was Hispanic, very suave, loved the ladies. So he's in the restaurant chasing after some of our waitresses. We kind of goosed one of them, broke a bottle, and we had to fire him. And since we fired him, we got over 200 or 300 letters from his regular customers saying that we should hire him back. We got letters from judges, attorneys, doctors, all kind of people talking about what a great waiter he was. But they didn't realize he got fired for sexual harassment, a waitress. But it became so popular that they had it's still on the internet today. They had the Gilberto monologues. They had a play about it. And it was just unbelievable the popularity that they had due to getting fired for just reason. Let me jump till today. We've like everybody, COVID has just been an unbelievable thing. Who would ever thought we would experience something like that in our lifetime? I'm glad to see things are starting to get a little bit back to normal. But my position now and has been for the past few years, I'm still a founding member, I'm not an owner, but I'm the ambassador for the restaurant. So I'm kind of semi-retired. I just work a couple of days a week. I just started back 2 weeks ago. So I'm just working part-time as ambassador at Galatoire. So that keeps me happy. But we want to see the paper the other day. We just opened up we bought a building, the old Horace Mintz building across from the Montreal Hotel. So we bought that a couple of years ago and renovated, gutted it, and now downstairs has retail space. The second floor, we have two big dining rooms that seat about 150 people each, and we have one, the chef's table, that seats about 50. So we can seat 350 people at that place. So it'll be for private parties, receptions, wedding receptions. But the chef's table will be a regular restaurant where our chef, Philip Lopez, is an extremely creative chef. He's the extreme opposite of what Galatoire normally is. When we hired him, we knew he could cook. He used to have square root restaurants, which were very far out. He would use ingredients that I've never heard of. But he knows, to do that, you have to have all the basics. And he's doing a great job at Galatoire, keeping our traditional things traditional. But in this new place, he'll be able to do the traditional things, or if you want, he'll have some special menus with some of his creative things. And that's going to be open, I think, like 4 nights a week. It'll be a regular restaurant, but also a big catering place. We have things that happen, strange things all the time. I'll just tell you a few. I'll tell you one thing that just happened last week. We had a bachelor party. 10 young men, 25 years old from Mobile. They came in, and so they decided they would get a nice bottle of wine. They said, "Oh, we'd order this 3-liter." The 10 people all had a Galatoire cocktail first, get you in a good mood. Then they ordered a 3-liter bottle of Ken Wright's, a very nice, expensive Pinot Noir from Oregon. It's a beautiful wine. So we sent the guy up to get the bottle, and instead he comes down with a 9-liter. A 9-liter bottle is like a case of wine, all in one big bottle. And so we told him, the young man that went to get it, got the wrong thing. It's heavy. It's over a case. It's much higher than regular. Anyway, so we put it on a little table next to the guys. Instead of bringing it up right away, he went up and got the right bottle. They drinking the right bottle. But this made me realize the power of marketing, the power of sight, how much play that has into what people do. So these young guys, they finished the 3-liter, which is 4 bottles of wine. They kept eyeing that big bottle at the table next to it. And sure enough, open it. That was a $700-something bottle of wine. But no, the 3-liter was $700. The big one was $2,100. But they said, go ahead and open it. That just made me realize how important marketing is and sight. When you see something, you want it. Well, today was the first at Galatoire. Since COVID, we were able to go back and put on our table. We had, I think some of y'all were there today. Yes, we were able to put back on our table the water bottle, the sugar caddy, the Tabasco bottle, and the Leon Parent bottle. With COVID, we couldn't do that, but we did that today, and it made me feel good. Took a picture I put on Facebook. So, anyway, point after tea. And any questions? I don't know if you want to go ahead with that video or if I went too long.
I think the questions would be great right now.
Okay. Hello? Yeah, go ahead.
I hear. I'm getting ready.
Emery's retired. He was a great person. Oh, Mick Henry, yes. Oh, sorry.
He wrote this to OIA. Dave and I are deans.
Yeah.
And what I want to understand is, as we were rude and socially unacceptable, how did we become gentlemen scholars and jolly good fellows? And how did you apply that to your restaurant?
Well, that's a good part of it. We want our customers to feel like jolly good fellas. They come and have a good time. So that's our philosophy. That's our policy. I think it's worked pretty well. So I learned a lot from my brother Deeks.
There you go.
They taught me how to have fun.
We have our Deek lunches club there every month or every quarter. We have a great time. Thank you, David.
Now I got my son on this computer. Andrew?
Hey.
I don't know what's going on. My son is on the computer.
Yeah.
I have 3 sons. None of them none of them are working at the restaurant. Some of them have worked in the past, but I'm kind of the end of the line of family members working at Galatoire. But I'm sure the tradition will be carried on by whoever owns it and runs the place. Yes.
I heard that you had a Joey in the restaurant. Is that true?
A Joey?
A Joey, a baby kangaroo.
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah, somebody brought that in a little carry-on bag. We got a couple of funny things brought in. Yeah, that's true. Rather chase it out. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the family dynamics? About the time you had 8 owners?
Okay. Well, that was my my mother and her 2 brothers, and my mother 2 brothers. And she had three brothers. My mother, 3 brothers. Of them, 2 of the brothers worked at the restaurant. Rene Galatoire and Gabi Galatoire. So 2 of those 4 worked. On the other 4, my cousin Yvonne Galatoire, she worked there. She sat at the desk for over 60 years. She was quite a fixture at the restaurant. But the rest of them, I had my cousin Justin Fry. He was the 4th generation like I am. He started working there shortly after I did, and he stayed there till a little bit after Katrina. He had to retire, but he stayed and worked with me, side by side with me for many, many years, Justin Fry. Then also on my side, my generation was Leon Galatoire, my cousin. He came and worked with us. He worked as a chef. He wrote a Galatoire's cookbook. He's a great chef, but he retired a good long time ago. But now he's one of the owners of the restaurant. He and his sister, Michelle Galatoire, and their cousin, Duane Galatoire, who was Renee's daughter. So that's how it is now.
Got one back here.
Question, could you speak to the comparison of the old line restaurants in the city and the competitiveness of them versus the newer restaurants that are high-end as well, and just, how that competition plays out?
Oh, I love to go to the new restaurants. I enjoy all kind of restaurants. I like to have fun wherever I go. But the new restaurants, very creative. More of the older restaurants are very traditional and don't change too much. New Orleans has its own type of restaurants that are a little bit different, own style of cooking, sort of a Creole cuisine style of cooking. Yes? To-go boxes? Okay, well, yeah, I was going to tell that story. I know the lady she's talking about. This was a long time ago. Their account number was D2, so they were good customers. I still know their account number, D2. D, letter D, number 2. They were very good customers, and they would come sit at the corner table and have the same weight and everything all the time. And she was, I don't know if she was senile or what, but at that time it was kind of a no-no to take any of the leftover food to go. For some reason, people didn't want to do that. But she kind of started it, but she was kind of embarrassed to actually take it to go. So she'd bring leather gloves. She'd open up her purse, and I swear it's true, she poured turtle soup in her leather glove. Anyway, now when COVID started, we started promoting. We're doing takeout pretty much only for a while. And now we do takeout like any other restaurant.
David, I have a question. Speaking of turtle soup, I've heard a rumor, perhaps secondhand, reported to me by Dr. Robson Luch, that he went to Galatoire, ordered the turtle soup,
yeah,
and then he found a live turtle
yeah,
in the turtle soup.
that's true.
Could you reflect
That is very true. He had he had 2 young kids with him, about 10 or 12 young kids, and they ordered the turtle soup in his pocket. He pulled them out and stuck it in he said, just bring water. So they brought the water. He put the little turtles in the soup for the kids. We didn't do it. He did it. I was there at the time. Oh my God. Anybody else? Well, thank y'all. They went too long. Okay. This is a video. It might go half an hour, but it's a video we had made in in 2005. It was our 100th anniversary, and the James Beard Award. I'm sure all y'all have heard of James Beard. It's probably the most prestigious award a restaurant can get. It usually goes to a restaurant that's a chef owner, where he'll cook all his fancy stuff, and he's fantastic. But 15, 20 years down the road, it might be gone or retired or something. The rest might be, somebody just told, well, Galatoire says that Chicago was one of the best. Now it's a deserted old little shop. Anyway, but in 2005, the James Beard Committee said, look at Galatoire. They don't do anything, anything too extraordinary, but they do the same good food, the same thing over and over, the very good food over and over for 100 years. So let's give them the award of Outstanding Restaurant of the Year. It'll be our birthday present to them, the 100th year birthday present. So for that year, we had a video made all about the restaurant. So hopefully y'all enjoy the video.
David, as we're on the verge of Memorial Day, the threshold, I want to let you know in 03, I went to Galatoire with Gary Mason, put together a special thing for our unit, 20 Special Forces Group, and we celebrated before we went overseas. That's a very important memory in my life. I want to thank you.
Wow, well, thank you. Thank you for your service there.
All right, what we'll do is, first of all, thank Mr. David Gooch. Please join me. Thank you all for coming as well for the last lecture of the season, the first one back in person. On behalf of the club, please accept this small token of our appreciation. Wow, you're speaking with us tonight.
Very nice. Well, thank y'all. Thank y'all.
What we'll do is we'll show the video. I'll start the video in just a moment, and we'll get go to the back for dessert and cookies. So if you want to come back and enjoy dessert with your cookies and root beer float, please feel free to do so. Thank you all. It's really perfect in every way.
It's too long.
There's no way.
Thank you so much. That was fabulous.
Oh, thank you.